Okay, I will call the March 9th meeting of the Portsmouth Trees and Greenery Committee meeting to order. And before we proceed with anything else, I did want to take care of something. I'll pass this out to Pat. Pass that down here.
Thank you.
And as you know, we did the attendance, attendance for last year's meeting. So I brought it to have a certificate of Pat and Peter of perfect attendance. Our Portsmouth Trees and Greenery Committee certificate of perfect attendance. This is to certify that each of you attended each and every meeting of the Trees and Greenery Committee in the year of our Lord 2022. This proclamation issued at Portsmouth on March 9th, 2022. The Trees and Greenery Committee by its chair, Peter J. Locke. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I feel honored. Thank you, sir.
And one of you had mentioned that God, you should get those.
That was
so.
Pat,
I
because
didn't have a
she too
star,
went
but I
to
did
Catholic
have a
school.
little
I did not attend.
But, okay, we have the minutes of the February meeting. We can accept.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, removal requests. And first two are not Eversource ones, so we'll start 800 McGee Drive. We had some
Yeah, so this is,
questions last time.
AJ was asking if this is a chain reaction, and it's not. These were just brought up at the same time, they're next door neighbors. However, these three trees that I posted, I would advocate they need to be removed. There's serious decay up the tree, there's decay at the base of one of the trees. It just, basically, we know that whole entire row of Norway spruce needs to be managed. And this is a start, at least weeding these three out, and then the ones on the ends are good. But the resident expressed concern, and they're valid concerns.
Any questions about that? We have a motion to recommend removal.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And we can, just to touch on that, we will plan on replanting at least a tree or two. Well,
28 Sherburne Avenue. A multi-stem Norway spruce, Norway maple.
It is a Norway maple, that's what I'm trying to correct.
my mistake.
Right.
And any discussion about it?
Well, I don't know about the health of that tree, and I'm inquiring about that, but I know that it is across from the power lines and it's a large tree. And I really do love large trees, and I think when we can have large trees across from power lines, it's always good. And I don't know what the health of the tree, it looks like a beauty to me.
Yeah, I thought it, I actually went to see it twice. I went yesterday during the heavy winds, and I noticed some debris down in the yard of the owner, and then next door as well. So I thought, again, not knowing the health of the tree, I thought pruning it, the two limbs that go toward the house probably would be beneficial, but again, I don't know, I don't understand the health of the tree, but it is beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah,
This descendant view, I thought it was singularly ugly,
You thought it was what?
and no one would deliberately plant a tree like that. Clearly, it's some volunteers that sprang up that were allowed to grow close to maturity. But I agree about the wires. My advocates, I would advocate taking it down and planting a nicer tree in its place, probably managed.
I should relate to the big tree, aspect, because it takes a long time to be a big tree, but if you look at the back side of that tree, around the base, the thing that concerned me more is the bark damage all over the base of that tree. And I don't know what caused it. I've been to the tree now 3 times, and I just called a buddy of mine this morning. There's something is going on with that tree. So if you look at all the bark, there's all kinds of little cracks all over the base of that tree.
Yeah.
One or two of them is, somebody hit it with, whatever, piece of equipment, whatever, weed whacker, but I mean, these are up 10, 12 feet up off the ground, and there's a tremendous amount of them. So that tells me it's insect damage. I don't know what it is, and Chuck and I were just talking about it this morning. But it's
Did you notice that there's like a pipe coming out of the ground at the base of
there's a
the
bunch of
tree?
different things going on with that tree.
I've
I mean,
never
poor
seen-
pruning cuts over the years, it's got a bunch of different issues.
Also, there's that included bark section at the base. There's a section of,
Brown like that.
like Dick had mentioned, you got volunteers growing together, and there's a section of included bark that's actually
Yeah.
pushing away.
Yeah.
That's gonna fail, but my bigger concern is what AJ's talking about. It looks like someone, I don't even know what, there's these holes, and there's some
You look
sort of
around, there's
insect
little
damage
cracks.
all over it.
I did see
So
that.
every bark naturally cracks and peels on trees, and that's okay, because it has to expand. The problem is when it's, so, sort of a random pattern like that, that's so big on the base of that tree. Every one of those spots on that bark is dead. Which, again, no big deal in a big diameter tree, but you would add up all those little dead spots.
Yeah.
And the plumbing of the tree just isn't working. So it's not a big obvious spot of rot on the, on the side of one of the trees, like we've got some of the others, but there's something going on in that bark. I'd actually like to peel it. If we take it down, I want to peel that tree before we take it. So then we're not dealing with moving whatever's in that tree to some other place. I don't think it's ALB. That's the first thing that came to my mind, just because it's a big tree issue south of here. It doesn't show any of the characteristics of it. There's usually a pencil sized hole drilled, looks like a tap hole coming out of the tree, and the insect exits. Just didn't look at the tree enough to know that.
And also with this one, we would be looking at planting 2 to 3 shade trees in the green strip. There's no trees in that green strip there. So that would be a good thing, because we're not right under the wires there, so
Right,
kind of that whole strip. going
so
down.
then you could choose something that would
We
not
do,
be 30.
yeah, and it'd be, a single stem. That's the other problem, is it definitely was a volunteer at some point that just had the multi-stem situation going on, which in the near future, at some point, it's gonna fail just with that included bark section. It's tearing out. You might be left with the other 2 stems, but then one's in the road. It's just, I think we can do better than that. And whatever has infested that tree has done some damage, some serious damages, tip dieback, there's all sorts of stuff going on, so.
It's such a learning curve.
Well, my reaction was same as Deb and Pat's, that, it's pretty significant amount of greenery right there, and I'm not quite as comfortable practicing eugenics as Dick is. If something isn't practical, we'll kill it off, it's getting more, but anyway, I think it can be. Is that definitely on the city property?
It is, I double checked the right of way there, and we go in there quite a bit.
Do we have a motion to recommend removal?
I will motion to recommend removal.
Second by Mike, all in favor?
I
Okay, 4 Fairview Drive, Eversource request, European Beach. And I guess someone's gonna tell us which Fairview Drive.
So there's- all right, so to clarify, Fairview Drive is where this tree is off of Maplewood. Fairview Avenue is the other one that connects to Edmond, it's that little L. So there's a drive and an avenue, very close to each other. Anyways, the resident is here for that as well, but we met yesterday as well as the resident's private arborist, David Stedman with Northeast Shade Tree, who's advocate for tree preservation. And the kind of shame with this one is that pole was rerouted too close to the tree in recent years, so it caught the tree on fire. And that's why you have that stem next to the covered wire that's all that decay and stuff. So the thought is the hope is to, Scott, we can discuss this, but to bring that leader below the wire and there's that other leader coming up, a branch coming off the back toward the house. On that big leader, you cut it somewhere around there. And it's way below the wires, but in return, we can keep the tree for 4 years, so that's the hope.
Okay, so we have someone else for a public hearing on this. Identify yourself.
Peter, could she come up and sit at the microphone because we don't catch the, if you could come up and sit there,
Yeah.
because we're recording this.
Hello, my name is Emily Hutt and I live at 4 Fairview Drive. I am advocating to keep the tree. Really appreciate all of the help that I've gotten and Chuck meeting with me as well. Unfortunately, this has been a very healthy tree. It was an unfortunate incident that the wires were moved closer and it caused some trauma to the tree. But this is, a tree that is thought to have been planted during the time that Frank Jones had the property. And Portsmouth were very much about historical preservation. And I think that it's important that, that extend to trees as well as buildings. I experience this tree every day. It's part of the reason that we bought the property. It's apparently not on our property. But it's a beautiful tree and provides shade to our house. I think it helps with the drainage in the area. And it's something that people mention every time they come to my house. Is the first thing that they mention is the beauty of the trees. Thank you.
Please, David.
Okay.
Any other comments from Chuck? I think you talked about a solution.
I completely understand your position, and I had met with you
Yes.
probably well prior to Chuck, and
Yes.
Eversource's position isn't that, we need to cut down every tree that we think is bad, and I know you were concerned about
Yes.
what we were gonna leave, and that's when I got a hold of Chuck to say, if I do what I need to do, this is not gonna be a good situation for the homeowner, but, Eversource is perfectly fine with trying to preserve as many trees as we can.
Really appreciate it.
Scott.
I'm glad
Sorry,
to hear this.
I thought this precedes the development. I didn't think we went back to Frank Jones, but it's the European Beach property did.
It's a beautiful tree. It's such a beautiful tree. So, very lucky to be around it. Your house is terrible.
So do we have a motion to implement the recommendation of Chuck, which was to prune the front limb stem and the one that goes back towards the house?
I'll recommend that.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, Dodge Avenue, 3 white pines. I've thought of.
Yeah, there actually was a lot of concern about those. But I think that they really have to go. I don't think they have any future at all.
They look like they've been topped already.
Yeah.
Many times.
Yeah, it's like
So
a
it's
bush.
just a matter of.
Yeah. You're just gonna have, there's probably already significant decay from being topped a bunch of times. It's bad practice to be doing that still. So thought was, get rid of them and then we will replant some ornamentals there. The resident had some concerns about having a screen from 33, but
Mhm.
there
There's
is.
a lot growing on
exactly,
behind it, right?
There is.
And I thought the second row looked kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth behind it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Move to remove.
Okay, seconded.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Peter, I just want to make sure that if we have one person attending via Zoom, if they're interested in speaking, please raise your virtual hand or somehow let us know that you're interested in speaking to a topic. So that's Ann Towers.
Okay, Next, 533 Colonial Drive.
Mr. Chairman? Hold on a second.
Somebody trying to talk to us.
Go ahead, Ann.
Hi, I had sent an email. I was curious as to if we were gonna get notified the day and the date that the tree would be taken down. And are we gonna have to use our driveway for what's happening?
Which property is that, Ann?
533 Colonial Drive off of Sherman Road.
3 Colonial is what we're talking about right now.
So that's the topic right now, so we'll,
Perfect timing.
good timing.
So we have a request from Eversource for removal of one linden at 533 Colonial Drive. And Scott Richardson here from behalf of Eversource. You can tell us your plans and then your truck and then from Ann.
Yeah, again, this is just one of the trees, unfortunately, that has been planted in a bad situation. It's grown to a state where now it's touching the wires, or has been touching the wires. Some decay, I think in that one, it's the one I'm remembering. And, you know, Eversource is just trying to protect their infrastructure as far as trees falling on the wires. Luckily, I think since everything that the town has done and Eversource has done in the last over year, Portsmouth in the area haven't lost much power. I think that's, you know, part of what this board has helped accomplish, which is what Eversource wants to have accomplished. Unfortunately, this is just another one that falls into that category.
Chuck?
Yeah, Colonial is a good example of, in many areas, the wrong tree for the wrong location. Anyways, it is a proximity issue, and I will say, Scott and Eversource have done a great job. Particularly that neighborhood, there's way more than 2 trees that are kind of out of code for them. So to just have 2 requests right now is a good thing. I think that one in particular doesn't have a future just because of the location of those wires.
I should point out, I would say vigilantly guarded those lindens around Panaway from requests for removal and didn't involve wires necessarily, but driveways or other things. They were very reluctant to allow removals out there. And I'd like to tell us anything about the tree, your feelings about it. Ann?
Hi,
Okay, I think we can hear you now.
And is your only concern related to timing, to make sure that you're not blocked, your driveway's not blocked?
no, not really. I'd just like to know if, you know, maybe a couple days ahead of time, when the tree is gonna be taken down.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Usually I know about where the crew is on their removal list. So, yeah, somebody could definitely contact you or reach out to you and let you know that it's going to happen fairly soon. And the day the crew did show up, would be no problem to make sure that you had access in and out of your property.
And do you have contact information you could share with us?
Yes, I can give you my home phone. It's 431-1049.
Thank you, Ann.
And Chuck, I think you have my email address also.
We'll share that with Scott from Eversource.
Yeah, Eversource, when they were here last fall, trimmed all the branches all the way up. The only leaves were at the very, very top of this tree, which is, so I'm in a ranch and it's probably 3 times the height of my house. So I don't know, there's always a concern. It could go over and it would be right in the middle of my house and into my neighbor's backyard.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ann.
you. But this particular linden, this has there's no lower branches. Goes all the way up and then there's just, and the canopy is way above. Unlike the other one.
So one thing to be aware of, and we will be coming before the Tree and Greenery Committee next month to discuss this, is that we are planning a significant sidewalk project out of Panaway Manor. And I believe this is one of the trees that is likely to be damaged as a result of that effort. We've identified a number of trees and some strategies to avoid impact where possible. But there are going to be a number of trees that were coming before you that will result in probably removal. But we'll have a more detailed, we're having a public meeting for that tonight with the neighborhood to discuss the project. And then we'll be coming back to you with a more specific list, working closely with Chuck. One alternative that we are floating is that instead of building new sidewalks, that we just stripe the roadway as an alternative. Given the desire for sidewalks, I would be surprised if that was an acceptable alternative, but we need to at least explore that potential option for a number of reasons. So I just wanted you to be aware that this tree, may be already damaged as a result of, or could be damaged as a result of that project as well.
Here, any discussion, comments about 533 Colonial Drive? We have a motion to recommend removal.
So moved.
I'll second.
Second. Good.
Second.
All right, any discussion, all in favor?
I,
208 Colonial Drive, another request from Eversource.
It's the same basic issue with that, wrong place, decay on it.
but what is the health of that tree?
That one is, yes, that's got the split. It's not a bright future on that one.
That's such a great canopy. It really does. It's really beautiful.
That one's would be within a foot of the wire.
Probably.
Would this be another tree, Peter, that's part of the Panaway project?
It's on the
Same
same,
side of the
it's on
road.
the same side of the road that the sidewalk is going to be, that's slated to go on. So yes, it is.
But I think just my personal feeling on him. I hate to think of wiping out all those lindens out there under any circumstances.
We concur and we understand that. I mean, it's an incredible forested area for an urban setting. It's taken a long time to establish those trees. We are not replacing both, we're not proposing to replace sidewalks on both sides of the street. So we're looking to minimize that. And we're also, working closely with Chuck to figure out alternative ways of getting around and avoiding impacts. So, we're very sensitive to that. However, the residents have been very clear over, for a number of years, and monies have been appropriated by city council to do this work. And it's frankly getting to the point where it's a failure of management, me, to make sure something that the residents have been asking for and the city council has appropriated money for to be accomplished. So we're very sensitive to the balance here.
And it's not a question of trees being planted in the wrong place. Because when they were planted in World War II, it was.
That was perfect.
That's
wasn't,
right.
well,
It was a house built in the rock.
Could very well be.
And pruning this tree for a while, not so sensible at this point.
Yeah, there's quite a few in there too that have been pruned to the point it's almost embarrassing. They're just twigs with a little bit of,
Well, the one before was an
Yeah.
obvious example of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
This one, not so much at this point.
not as much. You spoke to the crack in the top.
If you look at from the roadside end,
Mhm.
any multi-stem trees have a pressure point, but this one. You can't see it well from the ground, but you can see that there's just a little bit of a crack starting. And looks like it's starting to open up. Well, there's not a lot of callus tissue around it, so it's been moving for a long time. It'd be an advantage to fly up and see that at that point, start poking in there. It's one of those things that we know those multi-stems sort of push apart.
Is that the
Perfect.
part that's nearest to the road?
No, actually, right in the bottom of that piece down. So if you're
So
out,
right
if you're-
here.
yeah, if you're out in the road, you can see it better than
Uh-huh.
around the other side. So I went
Okay.
back- I went back up this one, trying to get a better picture, I couldn't get anything better on my phone, but you know, perfect example of what happens in wind or whatever else is right at the entrance of close. And you all saw that stump of the trees half cut.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, the two of them, you know, push and at some point, that push comes apart. I don't think it's there at that point. It's not, you know, split all the way down. We've had some out there that, you know, are split, you know, several feet down in those cracks and they're become more obvious. We had one, I think, last meeting or 2 meetings ago. So it's not at that point. But you add in this, add the construction and the, you know, sidewalks. Let that tree be removed. So the sidewalk gets decided, you know, what's gonna happen to the sidewalk, you know, if everybody says we don't want any sidewalks, you know, that tree is still a foot away from the lines. So then it either has to be guarded or something has to be done.
Is there another linden across the street?
Most likely, let's see.
I just,
There's
in my
lindens
photo,
everywhere.
I can see a.
Yes, there's a silver maple directly across
Mhm.
and a linden.
And there are some Siberian elms up there too.
Yeah, there are some, I have Rick's houses up here, you know. Yeah.
I always just like to look at the whole landscape, the whole streetscape when
Yeah.
these things are in front of us, and I do feel better that there are larger trees balancing something.
The advantage to look at ahead is, you know, very similar to what we did before this committee, you know, existed. Down at the brick place there over by, the little brick houses over by 95.
Atlantic Heights.
So before this committee existed, we, you know, worked in that area. I'd taken out some of the big old trees, putting in some new ones during that construction project. And you're able to sort of leapfrog ahead in this sort of whole process. If the sidewalks go in, the trees don't die for, you know, 2, 3, 5, 6 years down the road. And it's a little bit of root damage, a little bit of rot, a little bit of this, a little bit of everything else. But then, you know, you lose all those trees at the same time.
Mhm.
If you take out, you know, a third of them now, make some pockets, you have some trees that are already established and getting there.
Plus, we can plant trees that will stay under 25 feet, at least in that location. They can be around for forever versus becoming an issue down the road. Having this happen and be a giant shock to the neighborhood.
And one other thing, you know, this committee shouldn't be afraid to reach out to Eversource and say, look, you know, we've helped you out tremendously by requesting or granting a lot of the requests that you put in. Is there any chance that, you know, you could donate some trees to us?
Second,
They've got a tree planting program.
I second that.
Yeah.
Worst you're gonna get is no. So you're right back where you
It's always good
started.
to ask.
that is something in the past,
Thank you.
Marsh Lane, if you've ever been down to Marsh Lane, there's that little kind of kayak launch area on the, is that the North Mill Pond?
By the Jackson House.
Yeah, by the
Oh,
Jackson
back in
House.
there? Oh, yeah.
All of
yeah.
those trees, there's a little arboretum we planted there, those were all donated by Eversource.
Oh, that's so
So
good.
we've done this in the past, but for this past cycle from, you know, last season and this season, I think it's well worth us asking, hey. Trees.
I appreciate that. 'cause
I don't recall whether I mentioned this to the committee last month, but we're planning on doing, for the 400th anniversary, planting 400 trees. The Rotary has agreed to buy 200 of those 400 trees.
Wow.
And if, you know, Eversource could kick in some additional, that'd be great. And we're looking, you know, for resident participation. And we've spoken to AJ briefly about this as well. So this is a great opportunity to really do some significant planting out in this area after, you know, after we've completed the project. So it's, you know, yes, it takes, you know, 50, 70, 80 years to get back to where it is now, but it is something that we have, you know, we'd like to, you know, take advantage of this 400 on 400.
And we did have success, I will say, like Aldrich. When that got redone with sidewalks, there was definite root damage, just because you can tell the proximity of the sidewalk, but we've preserved a ton of trees there. They did get shocked a few years after and looked like there was some severe decline, but we did retrenchment prunes. And if you go down to Aldrich, do it today, but look at all those trees, particularly on the right-hand side of the road. And they really have recovered. We kept them all. So maybe that down the road when this colonial thing gets discussed, maybe that's an option as well. To work around more than proposed currently. We'll see.
Any other discussion about 208? Colonial. Motion to recommend removal.
Just jumping on that.
I'll move. Seconded by Mike. Any discussion on in favor? Mike? Scott, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks,
I
Scott.
thank everybody for the concerns, dedications to the rest of Eversource has asked. We've done a fine job.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we're gonna have a presentation by David Disposes. And before David speaks, I want to, last time David was here, he made a comment that we missed that I didn't respond to. And David said that we're talking about the service credit union, the road behind here. David said, well, things came together and now we've got some money and we'll proceed. It didn't just come together. David worked for 10 years, getting the funding, doing the design work, dealing with the landowner, which was required great diplomacy and great patience. And because I was involved with the landowner. And David was tireless in pursuing that. And so it didn't just come together magically. It came together after many years of effort on David's part. So I just wanted to clear that.
Thank you.
So that,
Starting in objectives out there. Fun. So, one of the things that we'll do before I start this, for the Panaway is what we haven't done yet is go out there and physically check each tree. Think about Aldrich versus Panaway. Tree, and a lot of the trees in Panaway are physically in the way. Okay? It's not just root damage, it's literally 3 feet of the tree is in the way of the sidewalk. So we will go through there. Unfortunately, we have no additional right of way out there. We kitty the sidewalks around the trees. We don't own any additional right of way. The right of way is the back of the sidewalk out there. But in the past, we did it with MacGyver things. Use a local term and try to. So we will attempt to do that. We do have a closed meeting tonight, and as Peter said, we are trying sidewalk on one side of the street only, so we're only impacting one side of the road. So we'll continue to kind of try to push that agenda tonight. Try to limit what will come back here for next month. So hopefully much more positive note, I'd like to talk about this street. So as you know, we've been trying to build Islington Street now for 6 generations. And we are almost there. I think we finished preliminary design 4 years ago with VHB. And we have built, they were calling phase 1, which is started at the bypass and went to Dover Street and included Columbia Street and Columbia Court. So that construction contract is gonna finish up in May. And we have hired Underwood, Ironwood, he was working for Underwood, to do the finishing touches. The streetscape that we designed as part of the overall plan never got finalized. There was like 80% So we have hired Underwood to do the design for the utilities. And Ironwood is here, Jeff Highland is here. He is in charge of doing the final streetscape design that never been done. So what does that mean? That means picking the final locations for the lanterns, picking the final locations for the trees, picking the final details for how to plant the trees. So some of the trees in Jeff's presentation, you'll see that we're using silver cells. In other areas where we have utility conflicts, we might use some CU structural soils to put around tree roots.
What is that?
It's a structural soil, and when you look at it, it looks mostly like crushed stone. But it's got clay and other organics mixed in the stone. So structurally, it's strong, you could build sidewalks and stuff on top of it, but the trees seem to like it. And it gives the tree a little bit of a chance in urban, dense urban environments. We're also gonna be using some of the trees as stormwater treatment that you'll see in Jeff's presentation. So there are several sheets here about where we're proposing to plant trees. You'll also notice that we're hoping to do some substantial work in the entrance to Goodwin Park. Goodwin Park is about 130 years old now. It's gone through several revisions over its 130 years. Even the monument itself has been revised a couple of times, sometimes by theft, sometimes by
Jeff is instrumental in the redoing of it.
So this will be the next generation. One of the key goals we had was trying to use this sprucing up the entrance of the park as part of the streetscape improvements for Islington Street. So you notice if you go to this sheet here, we are planning a new main entrance to the park. So it's right now you have the kind of those 45-degree entrances that come off at the street intersection. You can see on this diagram schematically that what we're planning on doing is actually shifting those a little bit so they line up with the crosswalks going across the street to the side streets in the Garden neighborhood, and then creating a grand entrance around the existing monuments in the center. We're also planning on adding some bollard lights that are the same bollard lights that we're using in the Market Street Park. You know, they're the low black concrete bollard lights, because anybody who has walked through that park at night knows how dark it is. There's lighting around the monument itself. There's lighting on the corners of the streets, but there's no lighting inside of the park. So we're planning on adding some lighting as part of this project as well. That being said, I think that's a good enough entrance for Jeff. We're planning on probably doing some work near Bridge Street as well. It's kind of the entrance to the street. We're hoping to do some additional things there, which those are still kind of in flux, but we will be back next month for a final these are the trees we're going to use. This is where they're going to go type of thing. This is more or less an introduction to get feedback from you guys. The 90% design plans need to be done by next week. And so we're hoping that by the time we get feedback, hopefully today, by the time we see you again, we're almost at 100% plans. We're hoping to bid this project in April to start construction on the next phase this year. So that being said, Jeff's here and he'll give his presentation. If you have questions, we'll be here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all this morning. For the record, my name is Jeff Highland. I'm a landscape architect with Ironwood Design Group. And we're going to kind of walk through the Islington Street project. Dave did a great job already, kind of hitting the highlights. My goal today is really to get feedback from you. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made related to the street tree installations along Islington Street. We're gonna start the talk, if you walk through kind of the first page is a list of trees that we've had generally good success with in northern New England streetscape projects. Doesn't necessarily mean they're all appropriate for Islington Street, but these are just kind of our running list of trees that we generally like to use. For Islington Street, you can see I'm kind of walking through in the graphics, starting from the kind of the southwest end where phase 1 ended, right around Dover Street, is where I started this kind of graphic walkthrough. In total, what you'll see over the coming pages, approximately 40 trees, 40 new trees. So, 1/10 of what Peter said your goal was for the 400th anniversary, we are hoping to get on Islington Street. Islington Street, if you're not super familiar with it, we've all driven it, but sometimes we don't always take in little details like power lines and things like that. For the most part, on Islington Street, all the power lines are on the south side, although there are some service connections and things like that crossing. But the biggest opportunity is on the north side of the street because there are very few power lines running parallel to the curb line. So that's where we see most of the kind of the larger shade trees potentially going. And on the south side would be probably more small understory or flowering trees. That is not represented in the graphic here. These are kind of just the generic graphic. And also these locations that we're showing are very much still to be worked out. This is just kind of a first pass of where the trees might go. So as you can see, we're trying to get as many trees as possible. The spacing does vary anywhere from about 50 feet on center to about 30 feet on center. So we're trying to get kind of a nice rhythm, a fairly tight planting scheme for a number of reasons. First of all, traffic calming, the effect of street trees and traffic calming. When you're introducing a lot of pedestrians on a corridor, it's a very important criteria. We also have green infrastructure goals as well as kind of urban shading and urban forestry goals as well. Obviously, as landscape architects, one of our primary goals is to make sure these trees live for a long time. I'm sure you know, urban trees don't survive particularly long on average. So we try to do everything possible to kind of everything from picking the right location, picking the right trees, and then providing sufficient soil volume for those trees. If you're not familiar with our work, we did State Street, which was the first project in New England to use silvicels. And since then, we've used them in a lot more projects. And then Dave also mentioned structural soils, pretty familiar with those as well. I first was introduced to those during the Big Dig. We used them on a number of projects in Boston. Most recently, we used some structural soils on a project in Exeter, New Hampshire, on Lincoln Street. And it's been very successful. Trees now been in, I think, a year and a half. So we're familiar with kind of all the different options when it comes to kind of the street tree growing medium and soil volume. Also on green infrastructure, we were involved in Sagamore Avenue and designed tree box filters used there. We've since gone on to kind of fine tune that design, and we used it in Bridgeton, Maine recently. It's worked out relatively well from the tree box. The tree boxes for stormwater management are not really, I mean, it's not ideal for the tree. I mean, we're kind of trying to balance both tree growth and trees on streetscapes and also stormwater management. Sometimes those two things don't really, work out in the perfect scenario. I see an awful lot of tree box filters that have dead trees. So we try not to have that happen on projects. This is really more as an information for you, and I'd love to, like I said, get your feedback at this point because we really haven't gone very far when it comes to actual tree placement on the corridor. It's really kind of like the foundation discussion about what you would like to see. In particular, I'd love to learn more about, I know the city has raised curved planters, you've got tree grates at grade with silvicels, a couple, a lot of different kind of combinations, installation details. So if you have any preference, I think it would be great to hear that. if you have any concerns about like the number of trees we're proposing, any concerns about power lines, you know, there has been some discussion about, you know, should there be any trees underneath power lines? You know, so now is a great time to have that discussion, and if you have questions about soil cells or structural soil, or green infrastructure, tree box filters, anything like that. Happy to talk about that. Yes.
Talk about your desire to have trees that are likely to have long lives, which of course is desirable. Have you given any consideration to global warming and species that are likely to do well or do poorly? For example, I understand maples are not going to fare well.
Correct, yeah, and you know, a lot of that has to do with pest issues. I see more and more challenges when it comes to pests and trees and the survivability of trees. So our list of available trees seems to be getting smaller and smaller, especially in urban streetscapes, because it's a pretty challenging environment for a tree. So, you know, that's where I think the real thought process comes in. It's like understanding the new and more widespread pest problems that exist. And, you know, we seem to keep adding trees to the list of not to use trees. Maples is kind of one of those. We're using them less on projects, just out of concern over a variety of pests and challenges we've just seen over the years. So you'll notice in the kind of our list of kind of the preferred trees, you'll see there aren't, there are two maples on that list out of all those trees.
I have some questions. The first half that's been done of Islington, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago when we had this stage of that. What we did was basically I selected species, and then we bounced. Once the species were selected, we went from there. And we visited each spot, like you said, looked around. Anyways, my concern is that as for specs, we have the specs that have been used the whole project. It is our city of Portsmouth planting specs and details, so that they're planted a certain way. And then with the sizing, I think that it's important that we have some continuity from what's already been done on Islington, so it's not, you know, so that whole corridor looks not the same, but
Right.
like it's the same corridor.
Absolutely, and I understand, so 3.5 inch caliber is larger than what you put in.
Yeah, so
earlier,
2 to
so-
2.5.
Yeah.
And then I'd be glad to talk about, not right off the top of my head, but the species that we used, not keeping them all exactly the same, but I think that if we keep some continuity we have a lot of diversity in that first half. And we can continue it. There's some trees that we aren't gonna wanna put in here and yeah, that's just,
Yeah, this is just kind of
yeah,
this is a non-Islington Street specific list.
Yes,
It's just our kind of in-office
absolutely.
kind of list that we start
Yep.
with. And yes, but I realize the caliper size is bigger than what you would put in Islington Street. This is kind of our average.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is this whole section as tight on the right of way as it was the first section that we did?
It's the same road, it's the same layout,
Okay,
yes.
because I knew everything was sort of constructed in that first section. We looked at that when we we're doing the sidewalks and stuff. So when you're doing the bump outs, and we're, you know, trying to put in 4 trees in those intersections, you know, like a cabin or whatever else. And I'm all for putting more trees in, but we're also dealing with, you know, crossings that keep, you know, we're now being told to take down trees at.
Oh, yeah, no,
intersections.
we're very much cognizant of that. I've already told Jeff that if we're gonna plant trees at that Cabot Street intersection, they have to be small flowering trees so they don't interfere with the traffic signals that are going in. You know, and all the other things that we need to think about when humans are crossing roads. So we are cognizant of that. And we will make sure, very much make sure that we pick appropriate plantings for those high pedestrian crossing and vehicular crossing areas. Yes. very much in tune with that.
I think that will help that intersection. Right now, that intersection's a bit tricky. I live on Cabot, so I go down there a lot, and people coming out of Portsmouth, you have to really make sure you have eye contact there.
So one of the things that we're doing is those set of signals is actually coming down. There'll be a formal set of proper signals going in
That will be very helpful.
that has the signal heads overhead and off to the right. So when the sun's shining down your vision going down Islington Street in January in the afternoon at roughly 3:30, right, you have two signals to look at. All that sort of thing is being designed right now, and we will make sure that the two designs mesh.
And currently, what is the speed limit on Islington Street?
I'm actually
Is
not
it
sure.
35?
The default is
No.
30, state's
30.
default is 30.
Okay, it seems fast.
Yeah.
It always has seemed fast to me, because the street's so narrow and the
Right.
drivability of it, so just wanted to
And
throw
I-
that out as. I
So,
don't know if it would be-
Just as a non-committee related
Right.
topic, we are reviewing all the speed limits throughout the border. Tyler's putting together, he's working with the group, the Park and Traffic Safety Committee, and if you're interested, there's always the opportunity to come and chat
I
at
know,
the committee, so.
okay, just wondered.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, anecdotally, I will tell you that, you know, from my experience, the phase one that's complete, you know, traffic, you know, going by Aldridge, going by Thaxter, you know, Plaza 800 area, traffic is moving slower than it was.
I agree.
So I think it's going to work.
Now, at where isn't Cabot Street is this Islington Street also being the whole project, the Ricci project that's going on down by the North Mill Pond, that's going to have, I don't know what the final number is. Is this sort of, do you think about those types of things? Because I
We
I
do,
thought
but
that might be a
Compared to the amount of
intersection
traffic
that we
that's
know.
already on the road, that's background noise, really.
And and it's a totally separate section of roadway. I mean, the impacts are gonna be felt at the intersections. But those have all been analyzed and it's all been reviewed as part of the different committees' purview relative to concerns.
Okay, just wanted to, I know there's a lot of development going on there and just
Everywhere.
always wondering about. I
Everywhere.
know it is, yeah,
Right.
but always
So,
wondering about.
but yeah, that's kind of like background noise in the numbers, really, compared to the number of users that's already using the corridor.
Now, at Goodwin Park, Dave talked a little bit about that, I mean, we covered that pretty well. I mean, we are trying to create a situation where the park is more connected to the streetscape, kind of drawing or creating that kind of strong connection to the streetscape of the park. One of the ways we're doing that is creating that kind of central access into the park, aligning with the monument, the existing monument, and widening that and really making that the prominent entry into the park, making the two corner entries a little bit more secondary entry point. I think that will help a lot, kind of connecting the
Well,
park.
this
We
will
are-
mimic this on State Street, it will be mimicked. I'm looking at it going to Islington Street, so the prominent, will that be also on the State Street side?
No, this is not a park project per se, this is the streetscape project for Islington, so we're not working on the backside of the park.
Just,
Okay.
just be the Islington Street side.
So that's going to. stay the
Future
same.
work,
Okay.
future work.
These existing trees.
They are existing trees. We are proposing 3 new trees, and those are those little smaller symbols. Yeah, actually. So I have a smaller copy here, but this one right here, that one right there, and that one right there, kind of a darker symbol.
Yes, thank you.
What we were proposing to do there is probably a smaller flowering tree, because most of the trees in Goodwin Park are pretty substantial, large, mature shade trees. And it's lacking a little bit of that kind of understory kind of human scale to the park. So we thought that would be kind of a nice addition to it. We have already received a bit of feedback on some of the kind of the corner plantings, and we're gonna rework this a bit, so we don't have any kind of larger buffer plantings on the corners. We're gonna try to keep them a little bit lower, just so there's no hiding places for people.
And at the same time, we like to have hiding places for birds.
So
Birds love.
it's a difficult balance, but
Yeah,
there'll be some opportunity, obviously, for birds and pollinators and things like that. We're proposing to leave the fence on the Golden Street corridor. But nothing there will really change on that edge, other than adding the accent. We have not shown any street views along Islington Street at Goodland Park, just because we want to try to keep that pretty open and visible. And there are already a fair number of trees there, so. It's good park trees.
A design question for you. So looking down Islington Street, for example, in front of the mobile station, off of Langdon. So is the idea, you have two trees, two shade trees on the north side, and then a smaller tree, I guess, on the south. So is the visual idea is that you're seeing three, planted three, because I numbers work better visually in the designing. So is that, I'm just asking because I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, on a corridor like this, the rule of 3 or 5 or 7 is not quite as important. It's really, you know, because it's such a linear corridor. I always am more concerned about the kind of the rhythm of the trees as you're driving, and the kind of the density of the trees and distance between them.
Yeah.
Things like that. And also, one important thing on a streetscape is the placement of trees in relationship to on-street parking. Because you certainly don't want a tree where your car door is going to swing over. We tend to align them with the end of each parking stall if possible.
Right.
Those are just kind of some of the design details. We try to keep the trees at least 20 feet off of the intersection, probably 30 if preferable,
Yeah.
just to kind of preserve sight lines. And then obviously branching height, we try to make sure the trees have sufficient branching height, for pedestrians walking in close proximity to them.
Right. What about distance between, say, the two shade trees?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to things in the way. So we generally start with like a 35-foot planting distance, and it depends a bit on the types of trees. On the north side, we might have a little bit larger planting distance apart. But ultimately, there's so many things in the way on a streetscape project that we can never get a consistent space.
You do the best you can.
We do the best we can, we start and then we fine tune and we move things because of water lines and gas lines, catch basins, overhead power lines. There's just so many things on a streetscape project in the way that does make it challenging. And we haven't yet, now with the street trees, we also have roadway lighting as well. So that we're gonna have to look at. We usually start with the street trees because they're a little harder to place because we have to deal with soil volume and underground things. Street lights are, smaller little footing, it's never gonna change. So they tend to be actually a little easier to place. But the relationship of canopy to street luminaire, thing that's producing the light is kind of critical component also. So there's still some work to be done on fine tuning tree placement, the lights on the street, and then also what trees are going to be going to have tree box filters associated with them. Because that requires close proximity to catch basins.
I would encourage the committee to think of this as more species than locations. Because as you recall, during the first phase of Islington, we had aspired to put trees in a number of locations, and due to conflicts in the middle of construction, we had to come back and explain why we're not going to be able to accomplish that. So, it really, I would focus more on, we're going to try to maximize the number of trees we put in. There are a lot of constraints that we know about now, that we know as we get into the design, and we know when we get into construction. But in terms of species, in terms of diversity and that type of thing, that's what I would focus more on at this point.
Well, that was my next question. How and when do you determine what these trees will be that you want to plant? How do you, is that Chuck's?
We work with Chuck.
Last time it was not, we worked together with who did that project, and it's kind of the same as Peter just mentioned. You have a list of species. We actually went and selected them all. And then
Okay.
things change and nurseries only have certain things, and we work around that. And I'd say what we have now in that first phase is very diverse. It's not as there's some things that we didn't work out or we changed our mind or nurseries, but the biggest thing was selecting it first. There's going to be some adjustments during the project. And then the most important thing, in my opinion, is when the planting starts, really being on site with the contractors doing the planting so that they get planted correctly.
Mhm.
Every single one did, and I don't know if this is still Roger and Severino.
We don't know yet. We will not know
Anyways,
for a while.
establishing a good relationship with whoever's managing the project, so we can ensure that we have really nice trees.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you.
This is a not species question, but I was looking on one of the last pages, and so sometimes you have the iron grates, and sometimes this is what you call the box. With the
Yes.
soil, that's what you. is that
Yeah,
what
so
you're referring to?
these are just basically examples of different types of tree plantings.
Uh-huh.
You know, this was an attempt to, get some feedback from you. So the upper left picture, that's obviously State Street, that's kind of a raised planter, sort planter. The middle one is also State Street, silver cells being installed. All the way on the right is State Street, and that's an existing tree that has silver cells around it with a flush tree grade. And part of that does become a bit of both an ADA accessibility and a maintenance component, because if you don't have width for the sidewalk plow, you can't really put a raised planter in. So sometimes we're kind of forced to do the tree grade approach if we have limited sidewalk space. The lower three pictures are actually the use of CU structural soil. You asked the question earlier, what does it look like? I mean, that's kind of a picture of it, or and it basically an angular stone with soil and typically some hydrogel mixed in, and it's a proprietary product developed by Cornell University, I think 30 years ago. And they still kind of hold a patent on it. And there are different types of structural soil, but the best one is the Cornell University structural soil. That's been my experience. And it's unusual stuff. You'd never think that a tree could really grow in it.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it looks like gravel that's been sprayed with water and coated in dirt.
Yeah.
But it does work. I mean, when my preference is when you can do silva cells, but there's times where you just can't because there's all sorts of stuff going on underground utility wise. And my preference, just because I see the snow side of it and the tree side of it is, and just the failure side of it is, I love the granite planters, the raised granite long-term. Just because eventually, at some point in time, the tree grates will need to get replaced or the tree will be too big for the grate.
I was wondering about that.
But then there's times, like Jeff said, where maybe the sidewalk's too narrow and you won't be able to get a sidewalk plow through, so you gotta do a tree grate. So my preference is granite planters when you can. When you can't, do tree grate.
Now, you also have used tree guards. So obviously, we generally, where we have a flush tree grade situation, we usually try to include a tree guard just to protect the tree.
Yes.
The raised planters, like you said, are great because it does provide, kind of a bumper there for the sidewalk plow. Which is pretty effective, but,
Yeah, to answer some of your question or potential question about the tree grate, they can be enlarged. It's a series of rings in the design. Unfortunately, like other things that, they get forgotten. In the tree grate and the tree have an issue. So then you get called in 5 years too late to look at what those issues are. It's just, just a maintenance thing, like, like anything else, like everything like that, it's cast iron grate, lift the grate up, whack it with a hammer, put it back in, and, that tree can keep growing. But it is something that's, say that.
And it, even though it does have maintenance associated with it, and you have to watch the tree and the tree grade, it's still great to have that tree. So, it's better to have the tree,
Oh, yeah, I
in
agree. I
tree
like
grade
that.
than no tree at all.
It's just a way to stretch out grass.
Absolutely, I do like both looks, and I think they're both used very effectively on State Street in the places that they are now.
And that's what we would kind of propose, kind of moving forward with, obviously what's been done in phase 1 is kind of dictating what we do in phase 2, and then using these variety of different treatments based on the tree's needs in a particular specific location on the corridor. And then to throw the last one in, the tree box filter. I don't have a good sense at this point of how many tree box filters there will be. Probably not a lot. Probably very used sparingly, because again, it's a pretty specific thing, and it needs to be in close proximity to a catch basin, so that if the water can't get into the tree box filter, there's a catch basin in close proximity. So, and then also the grading of the roadway and things like that, so water gets into it. So there's a lot of little details associated with a tree box filter that all have to come together to create the perfect location for them.
So in general, I think that's our opening volley. Over the next month, we will be working, Jeff and Chuck will be working, I'm hoping intensely together to come up with a final tree list and a final location list. So that when we show up again next month, we have definitive plans for you. Is there any last minute guidance you want to just shout out while you have the opportunity and you have our ears?
I would offer, if I could, the granite protection, granite boxes. I don't know, it was the first time we used that in Lower Congress Street. And I know as careful as Peter and Chuck are, every time you have 2 inches of snow and the sidewalk plows have to go out, every tree that doesn't have protection is at risk, no matter how careful you are, let alone at 3 o'clock in the morning after you've been plowing for 24 hours. And I just think if you can possibly do the granite protection and then the vertical tree grades, yeah, so you got to replace them with some, but that tree I sound like a preacher. But, that tree is at risk for its entire life. And it was just one little nick from a blade after you put the silver cell in and protected it and got it through its first 5 years. And then the plow skids a bit and it's damaged. And can we put in the contract the city specs that Chuck has developed over the years on the actual planting of the tree, so that I know you do that at pre-bid.
That's done standard.
Okay. And there's something a note on Goodwin Park. Peter came in 4 years ago about some improvements in Goodwin Park. There were some issues that were being caused by the dense foliage around the monument. And we had some, I think all of us maybe said, okay, it's kind of nice. But realizing that there were various safety problems and sanitary problems in that area right around the monument. And slowly, it wasn't done immediately, but over 2 or 3 years, the plan was accomplished to clean that up, and it looks very good. It's done very well. And I don't have an objection to the 3.5-inch caliber trees. I think some places bigger is better. I know Chuck may disagree with that. And
I go for bigger.
anyway,
You know, we hear this all the time about, you know, supply chain issues with virtually everything. Same thing occurs in the nursery industry. So it is getting more and more difficult to get good quality plant material. It's at an appropriate size. It's easier to get smaller sizes at this point.
So this is a wish list here.
Well, I was gonna say, the other big thing about smaller sizes is just they're much easier to establish.
Yes.
So a 2-inch tree versus a 3.5.
Yeah.
Oftentimes will actually surpass the 3.5 as the establishments quicker, and the watering routine for whoever, which is segueing into my next question of, is there gonna be a similar watering contract with whoever installs the tree or how?
Yes, there will be. Yep.
I agree.
It's just,
Okay, we thank you for your time.
Thank
you.
If you have any thoughts, please feel free to reach out, okay?
Really great. I'm enjoying watching Islington Street roll.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Guidance on tree labeling.
All I can say about that is we have a meeting on March 16th with Peter and Corin. Myself, a couple of the Piscataqua Garden Club ladies. We have been, and I've already been in contact with Chuck and gotten the list from the intern about trees that have been identified. Who was this? Could you just tell me who what the intern was, or where they were from, or what the initiative, or how that
I
happened?
believe, did everyone here meet Emily?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Oh, I
so I
guess.
might have been right before. But anyways, Emily was an outstanding intern from UNH.
Okay.
Now she's moving on to actually do forest research at the University of California, Davis. Anyways,
Okay.
we needed to do tree ID. That was a project that I come up for with Emily. And those trees have all been identified, they're located, and you had the common and scientific name. And the thought was, because so many of them, especially the more unique trees, they're not mature. So the thought was, you can't drill into the tree like you could maybe on a big mature tree, but they're all of the tree ID companies that we've gotten quotes from. At the little, it's like a black stake with a sign built on it, which goes in the ground. So we were gonna do that order, but it didn't come to fruition, but the work is done, but
Right.
it was a great, it was great when you reached out, because someone else wants to do it, that's even better.
Good timing, and we begin in the church, so I'll have a better report after our 16th meeting. And I must say, we used the stake on a low blueberry bush or high blueberry bush out in Little Harbor, and nobody has needed it. It's still there.
It's
It's been really,
Awesome.
yes, it was kind of a.
Update from city arborist Chuck Baxter. And, well, it does
Yep.
some things going on.
Yep, yesterday was we had some storm damage, so just to touch base, the exit of Colonial if you're leaving Colonial on that right-hand lane on the corner there's a big linden that broke in half. And we need to take the rest of that down kind of as an emergency, and so that's gonna happen today. Had some trees come down, FW Hartford, a pine on Little Harbor Road. So it was a colorful day yesterday. We're gearing up for spring planting. We're trying to arrange some Arbor Day plans. We don't have any plans as of right now, so I'm open to kind of treating that week of Arbor Day to have different things, whether it's planting with a school group or anything. So if you have any ideas for Arbor Day,
Could we
Send them my
include the Adopt-a-Spot people? Would it be a nice
Absolutely.
time to bring them all together? We haven't done that in a while. I remember a couple times when I started an Adopt-a-Spot, we had some gatherings, and it was really a wonderful community moment, because we had different neighborhood people come together, and I met different people, and there's such pride.
yep.
And there's a lot of effort and dollars invested in these Adopt-a-Spots.
Yeah. We have the ability to do something like that if it's a group. Oftentimes we do just a planting plant 2 or 3 trees, and in return, the folks learn how to properly plant a tree. That, stuff like that, so reach out to me. Anything like that, otherwise, we're the formal garden crab apples, that is it's the annual prune of those every single year. Those are meticulously maintained at Prescott Park. There's alcohol on our cutting utensils between each tree because this fire blight spread. And then the same goes for the downtown trees going into State Street all the way to Memorial Bridge, and then all the way down through Congress. All those trees, many of them are elms, will be pruned here the next couple of weeks. That's kind of a biannual thing we do. Other than that, gearing up for spring. Street clearance is kind of what's taking up a lot of the tree crew's time right now, is just keeping 15 feet of clearance over all the roads. It's a task we don't do in the summer because we're just buried in service requests. This time of year we focus on that a little more. So you see them out there in the middle of the road, that's what they're doing.
Chuck, have you been monitoring that pervious mix that you're using in Market Square?
We have, which we have an issue with, not with what's been installed, but we have a supply chain issue. We're trying to sort that out. We've lost our contact and COVID supply chain issues. We weren't able to get any product last year, but it holds up, but there will be some spots that need to be redone, such as Porter Street. And our goal is to just have the product so we can redo it all. But a lot of the areas downtown, I haven't looked in front of Tuscan Kitchen, that area recently, but some of the main areas, they've held up well.
When we made the decision to take down all the pines, Little Harbor Road, which you folks did an excellent job, was there a formal discussion or intent to plant anything in there?
Do not believe there was on Eversource's part, and I think when talking with AJ and Chuck, the density and condensation with the road issue that was gonna be redone there, I don't think there was any potential plan to.
Yeah, it's kind of an undesirable area to go in and plant. The other thing is the actual road has changed, so the shoulder has shrunk as a result of the road being repaved.
Actually been reestablished.
Okay. Anyways, it's changed a bit. That's funny, we are actually clearing the shoulder of Little Harbor. There's a bunch of brush. You didn't really notice it before because it had this offset, but now that the pavement goes right to the edge, there's all sorts of little volunteers that we are removing, but we're not cutting down any trees. It's just little stuff. If you hear anything about that. But as far as plantings go, it's really a wooded environment.
Still a very tree lined road. You go down there, you see a few stumps here, see stuff missing. But it was nothing that, like we had in those public walks. We were able to repurpose some of the wood. We have milled up some of the wood that Eversource provided to us, and we're gonna be doing some more milling. We put the logs down at Creek Farm. So due to my family and everybody having COVID back in the fall, we couldn't finish milling. We're gonna be doing some more milling of that wood down there, and it's gonna be used around the Creek Farm.
Is there a way that, I think that Chuck just told us, like plant, prune, Prescott Park trees or Lower State Street on a schedule and all this involved? I mean, I'm always amazed when I hear additional things like that, and I try to be somewhat attuned to that. And the city council and generally the public have any way of knowing all that stuff. I mean, it's not, oh yeah, the guys are all planting in May and that's nice. But it's not May, it's May and June and July and 12 months of the year. I don't know how you get that.
Well, so this is something Deb had talked about, messaging. And the challenge for Public Works is we're implementers. We're not self-promoters. We're not, out there, ginning up press releases, we're busy doing stuff. And so it becomes an extracurricular activity for us to be able to fit in more outreach type thing. And Deb had suggested, well, there's a way that her group or this committee could do a better job leveraging, our resources to get that word out there. It's, the importance of this committee and the fact that we're maintaining, the trees of the city and the benefit to the residents as a result of that. And that is, if anything, I've learned over my years, I've always been an advocate for trees, but I've never understood how important it is for a community. And it's everything from water, stormwater, heat retention, cooling, and all the different things.
Purifying
And
the air.
Yeah, just the basic quality of life.
It is.
Just oxygen.
Yeah, so, having working with the city's website, there's this opportunity to add content to that website. Working with Stephanie, who's was on the line, to get press releases out and things like that. We would love to, and Stephanie is more than willing to help us out as well. But I think it's a really good point that people don't, especially budget season, when they're saying, well, why do they need, $50,000 for greenery? It's like, well, we don't have enough staff to do all this stuff, and we need, somebody else to go out and take care of the gateway parks. So it's, so we have to contract that one. Or, the specific equipment that's necessary, and it gets worn out, when you use it on a basis. The training, there's the expertise that we bring. We are incredibly fortunate to have Chuck, Corin, Max, Steve. These folks are trained experts, and they're not just going out and cutting trees down. Right? So it's a huge benefit. And your point's a good one, Peter. That the general public doesn't understand the value per se.
And if I could interject, even worse than not understanding it is, or is maybe a byproduct of not understanding it, is that social media has just worked against us. The posts that have gone on to the Facebook page, Portsmouth page, not the city page per se, it's very negative when people started noticing that the pine's gone on Pierce Island. I mean, conspiracy theories, and it's just like, well, why did they do it in the winter? And I'm thinking, well, so they didn't ruin the ground, but it just, and then it takes on a life force. And
Yeah.
it's very negative, and so we do have a city councilor who is very much in favor of promoting our committee, and just happens to be related. But he was the one who actually said, we really need to get some information out there so people understand you're not just there to cut trees down. You're actually doing the opposite. You're trying to preserve the trees that we have. And so I don't know. I think it's probably an effort that we could take on. It doesn't have to be gigantic.
So one thing, I don't know if you've seen some of the videos what we've done for stormwater. I'm going to volunteer Chuck, to work with Dan, one of our new employees. He's kind of spearheading those things. I think that would be a great opportunity to do a little, it's a TikTok or a little tiny snippet of, the day in the life of tree, the city's arborists.
Right.
And just show the types of things that we do, everything from watering the trees to trimming to climbing, and what are the benefits, safety, quality of life, environmental, all the different things. And just do a very quick synopsis. And I think we could do something really quickly, and I'd like that. So I'm gonna reach to Dan.
Yeah.
And I think we can do it as part of our stormwater. So the big impetus was a regulation to do outreach associated with stormwater. And so that was kind of the, we were doing the traditional paper stuff and web, Dan's like, well, nobody consumes information that way anymore. Give it a picture, boomer. So I think this would be a great opportunity to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, PHS now has a garden club.
Yeah.
It's only been going on for a couple of years, and I see the work done through the high school, through the sustainability committee.
Yep.
Very powerful.
Yep.
Very powerful, and all city councils have listened to what PH students are working on. So, you know, I mean, that's part of my whole garden club, a project is to loop them in and try to raise visibility about what's going on. That's been sort of our charge given by Garden Club of America.
That's great. I think it's.
And working also neighborhoods of diversity. We really want to plug into different kinds of neighborhoods of people living. I know like in Manchester, they have gardens from people from different countries and they're growing their vegetables. And I see a lot of potential here at Portsmouth to loop that in.
Cool.
If you maybe alert the committee when the public works budget is coming up next cycle.
Right now.
Should we go next week?
So
Advocate?
budgets have been finalized and submitted to finance. They'll be going, there'll be council workshops coming up soon. They're supposed to be submitted to council the 29th of April. And so it'll be fast and furious after that. But it's always appropriate to reach out to your elected officials and, you know, express your support for the types of things that we do. So you have a conduit to it.
And I think, Pat, you weren't here last time, but Councilor Cook said it.
Yes.
And, so
yeah.
You know, just having the presentation today, the fact that we're having a meeting to discuss and an expert hired to plant trees as opposed to building the road, building the parking lot, et cetera, and then saying, oh, maybe we can fit some trees someplace in. I mean, that is part of the project. It's just so far beyond anything that happened not that many years ago that it's hard to even get my head around.
And I always encourage citizens to come and look at our meeting. It's archived. They can look it up.
Yep.
It's easy. That's an easy way to do it. Because it's the truth.
Yeah.
Well, we're having the tree planting for the 400th. It's 9:30. I'm not sure that.
I have to go and flying out this afternoon, so
Right.
we're gonna buzz, but
Yeah, and I feel like I've already kind of given a synopsis of that.
Well, any urgent old or new business that we should talk about? So I would consider the meeting adjourned.
very good meeting, very good. Chuck, I can't tell.
No problem,
But
anytime.
I'll
Just
give
reach
you a
out.
call.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Are you sure you want to start recording? Yes.